All right. What's up, good people? We back again. Sister Outsider. This week we're talking about the interview with Audre Lorde and Adrien Rich. And so we had started chopping it up a little bit before we jumped on. And Martin was sharing some things with us. And we're going to go to him right quick and see what he was, see if he can kind of unpack some of the things he was sharing before I hit the public broadcast. So Martin, go ahead and hit us off with some of the things you were sharing prior to.
You know, I'll say it like this, like the book Sister Outsider. For the first time, I felt like an outsider in the sense of when she was talking about the male language. And I felt like, what did I do to participate in creating the language? Where am I complicit in keeping the language? What am I not doing in changing the language? But I felt, I really felt like that I did something that I didn't know what I did. I just felt this feeling like I'm doing something, I'm not doing something, or I did something, or I'm a part of this, and and it felt like I just wanted to do something, right? And that's kind of sort of how white privilege works. It's like the guilt makes you just say, hey, I want to do something, versus sitting there with her and what she's saying about language and really just sit with it, shut up, sit with it some more, and just try to feel what she was saying. It really, I was uneasy. And it wasn't just it was more than just a thought. I felt really uneasy. I felt like somebody was chastising me or calling me out. It felt like I had made an error in baseball. You know, it's like, coach, like, you made the error. Like, everybody like, hey, you got to do better. Like, I let everybody down some kind of way. But it was really it was a compelling argument that she makes.
You know, there's a point in here where Audre Lorde asked this question when she was talking to Rich, and she says, does this type of ignorance give us the opportunity to extend an excuse? Now that's Audre Lorde saying. I'm not saying that to you per se, but that's what Adrien. Right. That's what Rich asked Audre Lorde, because she was when she was talking about this. Because even though she was talking about Audre Lorde while she was young and trying to figure out what does it mean, how does one come to this point of writing poetry and learning, you know, based on what you're saying, how do we then get past the language barriers in our understanding of and in sexism?
Yes. Like, this is what I felt. Honestly, it was like, I'm like, any move that I felt like, I don't play chess, but I know I heard people say checkmate where you can't move. That's how I felt like. There's no move here. Like, anywhere I go, I'm wrong. And so it was like, I was just, I guess, paralysis by analysis. It was like, well, I was kind of looking for an excuse. Yeah. I tried to say, well, you know, I'm a good person. Like, right. You know, and for somebody to question that in that sense, like, well, she has every right to. And then you start to look back. And I immediately, one of the things that really came to me was the language in the Bible. I was like, and I know when I was working on my demon, I took an Old Testament class, Dr. Dora. She really challenged us about the language in the Bible, or his language. And she really was like, and she said something one day that really stuck with me too. She said, whatever they needed God to be, the males, they made God that. Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha. They put the name on God because that's what they needed. And I felt kind of that same way in that class, right? I can't say nothing. Like, anything I say is like checkmate. What do you say with, what do you do with that?
But I think those are those moments that force us, like you said, to just sit there and deal with it and face it. and not try to fix it or to develop an avenue around it or away from it. It keeps putting itself in front of our face, and so we have to deal with it. I've become more aware of it. Like even when reading certain books and I hear it, it's like I cringe. It's like, why are we using this dominant language? Like it's more people and more ways we could have said that to include, to make everybody inclusive, instead of just using this one particular description. And so and I think what really brought that to my attention is when I did that J term in Detroit, and it kind of backed me in a corner to make me to look at things different and not necessarily accept things, but made me more aware and made me more heightened to how I deal with certain things, because it was easy to just skirt past it. But until it's really put in your face and continually put in your face, I think it was close to the last night when we had a huge, like, this breakdown. Like everybody was just tired of it. But I think once we got to that point, that was that point that pushed us over the other side, and we start seeing things from the other side of the perspective instead of trying to be so defensive from only our side of the perspective.
It's a statement in here that Audre Lorde makes when she says, "Until I got spectacles when I was 4, I thought trees were green clouds." And what it sounds like is, if we never have interactions with sisters who hold us accountable and brothers who hold us accountable with our own particular spaces and levels of sexism, we'll continue to be sexist, because we'll never get the opportunity to put on those particular spectacles to change our perspective, because that is what she is doing. Even though she is the woman here, but she's saying it was me learning certain things, because, in the beginning of this interview, she begins to say, I never read when I started learning. Right. I learned because through kind of this feeling, this rhythm of being in rhythm with the teacher. But when I had to do something different, if I didn't like that particular person, I would have never changed, because now you're forcing me to do something different.
Right.
And so when we move into those type of spaces as men, and we're not challenged, or we are challenged by women, by sisters and brothers, oftentimes, we get that machismo, and we want to, like, look, we're not going to do that, because what's wrong with it? This is what we've always done. Since we started talking about church, what's wrong with saying our Father which art in heaven? Because that's what the Bible says. The Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because see, now you're dealing with some levels of tradition. What happens if I marry this woman and she doesn't want to take my last name? Then do I not marry her? Because look, I just read something that I saw something probably an hour ago that kind of hinted toward that, where it appeared as if this brother was a little mad because the woman didn't want to take his last name. I mean, so what do we do in spaces like that, with language and perception, becomes the impetus? Because he's very clear that language and teaching are survival methods and weapons. Don't y'all all speak at once now?
I was gonna say, like she said, when I first started teaching, I really didn't know what I was doing. That's what I'm about to say. Like, I had to learn how to, and I think we have to learn how to dismantle that. And I know they use the word dismantle racism and sexism. I kind of like the word destroy, because the more the closer I get to it, to understanding sexism, dismantling is just it in itself reeks of male privilege. That's like Malcolm said, if you pull the knife out of my back, 2 inches, then yeah, you say I pulled it out. But if you're the one with the knife in your back, it's the fierce urgency of now, not just what Martin King said for black folks, but for women. Why wait? Why just, just take it piece by piece? That's when I hear dismantle. How can we destroy it? And for those of us will say, well, I don't think that's possible. I don't believe that the woman would say that. I think the women would say that it is possible. And those in power would say, we're trying to get there. But, like I said, this thing right here just tore me up, man. It just, in a good way.
Well, I thought a little bit about, well, not a little bit, a lot of it about how she goes back to this idea of thinking or knowing versus feeling, and clarified what we read earlier. I can't remember which one it was, but one of them, she was talking about how males tend to think and seek that knowledge more, or try to get an understanding, as opposed to a female feeling. And she was, she says in this interview how she's accused of being anti-feminist in that way, like playing up the stereotype of women being more feely and not really being intellectual. And she said that's not what she meant at all. It was a dichotomy. It's not a dichotomy. Excuse me. It's not a dichotomy. That there's a balance between thinking and feeling. And I think what happened to us, and I can relate to what Martin is saying, is I begin to feel. I am a thinker. I like to rationalize and logic and all of that and get an understanding of something. But I couldn't get an understanding of this because I'm not a woman. I can't understand it. I have to feel it. And I felt it in her words. I felt, or I began to feel what I felt. I still couldn't say what she felt, but I began to, in that what I felt was not comfortable. It made me rethink or try to start rethinking. And there's that thinking again, how I'm reacting to how somebody else is feeling. And it's similar to, I guess, this Adrien Rush that's doing the interviewing is a white woman, and she says that's what I was asking you for when you were talking about racism. I was asking for documentation. I'm asking you for the rationale, the thinking behind why you're saying these things. And Audre Lorde says, well, the very fact that you're asking for this documentation means you're not hearing what I'm saying. I'm telling you how I feel, and you're looking for documentation. You're looking for some kind of rational understanding.
That's interesting.
And until we can get to that thinking, we get not past the rest, that balance.
Yeah, Walter, I feel exactly what you're saying, because again, what I did was I put everything through the race lens as well, which kept me, because I do have the privilege of being a male, but also being oppressed as a black person. So I can tried to vacillate between the two, and to hear people say things like, when people are saying, well, this is how I feel, but no, I want the concrete evidence all of a sudden. But no, I'm telling you that I'm afraid of the cops shooting me. Well, if you just comply, and so it's always this retort and dismissal of my feelings, because you want evidence. Because it's like you said, the more you move into this, the more uncomfortable I got. It's like, and it's also the privilege to slide back out, to then try to intellectual. Right. I was like, okay, let me see. Like you said, Walter, I'm like, let me think about this. No, you can't think about how she feels. And so, yeah, it just was, it was just really eye-opening for me.
Say more about that, Martin, because what do you mean by, everybody, we can't think about what she feels? What exactly do we mean by that?
Because we're not her. We're not in her space. And she uses, I love the way she uses the word space a lot. Like space, we're not her. So we can't rationalize how she feels about something. That's why, you know, in counseling, we use those type of terms like, well, how do you feel? Feelings are never wrong. The way a person feels is never wrong. But if you always, your retort is always to say, well, I got to think, let me think about your feelings. I mean, that's oppressed. You know how oppressive that is? Let me think and let me have a mental process to see whether or not you really, whether or not you should feel that. You know, and that's you talk about a knee on somebody's neck. I mean, that's what it is. It's like you're just repressing the human emotion, the human feeling. You're repressing that by trying to ask for, you know, concrete evidence. Let me, you know, you shouldn't feel that way. You know,
it's almost like I'm trying to validate your feelings through my mind.
Yeah, you got to have a formula for validation.
If I don't think it sounds right that you should feel that way, then, you know, I'm gonna try to either diagnose something or say something is what it ain't. But instead of internalizing the feelings, instead of trying to think your way through it.
But here's the thing: the feeling comes from a thought. There is something there that is rational. For Lord, that's what she's saying. We you know, people are trying to dichotomize thinking and feeling. When she's saying they're a balance, they are a combination of the two. We're always making what we feel based on what's happening around us. As a French philosopher, Henry Bergson, I believe, I might be messing his name up, but lovely quote that I love. It said he says, and he's famous for multiplicity. He's late 19th century, and he says the eye can only see what the mind can comprehend. You see, if I can't think about it or understand it, then I can see the same thing that you're seeing. I can see a cop on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I can see that with my eye, but still have a different. You have a different feeling about it. The eye can only see what the mind can comprehend.
So how does that because that's well, let me ask this prefacing question. Is that good or bad?
I think Lloyd, and I join him, Miss Lloyd says that it's not good or bad. It's what it is. And we've got to feel it. We've got to feel it, and then we've got to think it through, and then we've got to understand each other in that way. I've got to work to see what you see. And I've got to let my mind be free enough to comprehend what you're saying, even though I might not see it.
Right. But let's think about how she comes to learning, and then how does that work for men trying to I don't know if we could ever understand sexism, but how we can navigate within it a whole lot better. Because how she comes to the place of learning is, I never studied, but then I saw that wasn't working for my performance or being great or being she never considers herself a scholar so much, of being a better poet per se. I mean, how do we work all that into her progression through the process of learning to us progressing to navigate through sexism? Does that question make sense?
Well, I don't like your language, Brian. Why would we navigate in sexism, right? Like,
no, I said because you can't, because if you can master it, it will. Because you said we can't.
So it's okay,
and that could be bad language.
So the reason why I say that, so it's okay for people to navigate through racism too. Then
it's according to how you say it, and I get your point.
You see what I'm saying? That's all.
I get the point.
I mean,
when I
Tina,
said navigate,
shook me, bro. I can't shake it now.
When I say navigate, And what I mean,
process whatever. Yeah.
And I take that critique. And what I mean by navigate is more of how do we get to the point where we say, I can say that I did this wrong. That's what I mean by navigating. Like, how do I get from point A to point B where I can say I did this part wrong and I can admit it? That's what I mean by navigate through it.
Okay.
You know, I'm not saying that we make it. We try. Go ahead, Walter.
Well, and I highlighted this, and because you took it back to her learning, she said she learned that grammar was not arbitrary, that it served a purpose, that it helped to form the ways we thought, that it could be freeing as well as restrictive.
Right.
And then she goes on to say, it's like driving a car. Once you know it, we can choose to discard it or use it. But you can't know if it was useful, destructive power until you have a handle on it. So, you know, we know that hopefully once we feel what we felt again, I join Martin and Nick and the rest of us. I guess we all felt that same thing. Once we know the destructive power of sexism, then we'll want to discard it. But we can't ever, just like we tell white folks, you can't tell me what it means to be a black man. You can't tell me that. I mean, you can get as close as possible. You can hear my stories, you can empathize, but you can't tell me what it. So I can't ever use sexism to say that I understand it. And it is, I get what you're saying about the word, but it is a sort of navigation, maybe the wrong word. It's a sort of continual revelation. How about that? Continuing to grow in our as much as we can understand it, so that we know what to discard and when to discard it, so that we're not restrictive of our sisters, and we're more freeing for them.
And I think Walter, just to say a little bit, follow what you're saying, and I think that her voice, if you read what she's writing, it will be a forced evolution in you. If there's any good, it will be a forced evolution. However, a forced evolution it will have you to use the your mental process to say, okay, let's just go this far. So it'd be the difference between equality and justice. So you get equality if you got some intelligence and you look at the inequality, and you will rationalize and say, you know what, this isn't right. But justice, it takes feeling. And so until you know both pieces, then you will never be to the point where you can totally, like I said, destroy it. Because would you be willing to say now, instead of saying brothers and sisters, like, hey, let me say sisters and brothers, the last shall be first. And when you get to that point where I'm working on this daily, not just as an intellectual exercise, you know, not just but an exercise in empathy, right? I can't be you, but empathizing, as Cone says, when we will become a black feminist, womanist, and become that, and so that way we can at least have the feeling and the intellect to constantly work on it. Because if we just have one or the other, then we can never get past just some temporary things that we do that I think we'll fall right back into the same, because it's just like anything else. We pick it up as a hobby because we're reading this book, maybe. But then when the book is down and now we have to go out in the world, or when that woman gets that job, or you have to promote that woman who could take your position, or your language about women when you're talking just in general, all of that has an impact of how you're dealing with it. I mean, if you're really dealing with it, and especially for black men who fight against racism, like that's why I can understand why people pick it up and put it down. It's Martin Luther King birthday, I'm gonna pick it up. It's Black History, I'm gonna pick it up. It's December. Crickets.
But I think it calls for us to internalize it. We can't just, and I don't want to, I guess I don't want to say study it, but we have to really when we internalize it, it's not possible to put it down. It's at every turn. It's always
at least that would be our hope, right?
That's the hope. That's the hope.
That's the hope. Yeah.
It should be at every at the forefront of everything that we do. You know, and until we get to that place, I don't think destroying it is a possibility.
Say more, Nick, because I have a question. I got to figure out how I want to phrase this for y'all come back at me. Because hold on, let me show this. I didn't. So Scott said intentionality instead of navigate risk of vulnerability as a means. You know, and that was in response to what Martin critiqued me.
I think that vulnerability comes into play when we talk about internalizing it. Because it causes us to be vulnerable and it causes us the risk of getting knocked off our rocks of where we're comfortable. And as long as we're not vulnerable and we're not intentional in internalizing it, we'll continue to it's almost like we're playing freaking musical chairs.
Yeah.
I can have fun dancing around the chair and sit down every now and then.
Right.
Until I get knocked over to say, hey, there's a problem. You are a part of the problem. And until you realize it and get to a place to say, hey, I am a part of the problem, you're going to continue to be a part of the problem.
Yeah.
Now, this goes back to what Walter said earlier from Howard Henry, what was his name? The philosopher.
Henry Bergen.
Yeah, Bergen. About, you know, the whole point of the quote that he, you know, this is exactly what he's talking about. So does that quantify what Walter was saying? Your statement, that is, Nick.
I would say yes.
I would tend to as well.
Because until we can see it and then allow our mind to chew on it, we stuck.
Yeah. Let me share this. And maybe, okay, so my daughter had a baby doll, right? And she would always be like, Daddy, play with my baby doll. And I'm, that toxic masculinity in me was like,
play with baby doll.
I don't play with no baby doll. But one day, I said, teach me about this baby doll. I don't know anything about it. Man, she took an hour and explained things that I could not see, that she understood about the hair and how to braid the hair and the lips and how the milk goes in and you squeeze it, Dad, and it does this. But if I would never have been vulnerable to say, like, I don't really know about it. I don't know about the baby doll versus, defaulting to my masculinity. Well, men don't play with baby. You know what I'm saying? And so I learned something that day. Like, wow, I learned that she had a passion for this. This wasn't just a toy. You know what I'm saying? She knew things about it that would supersede any good father's masculinity to say, man, I want to do this every day with my daughter. Mm-hmm. I want to see what she got tomorrow about this baby doll and take down that barrier. I think that's where the feeling, you get I think I made an intellectual decision that allowed my feelings and emotions to be vulnerable. So I was able to extract that from my daughter teaching me how. And I plaited the baby's hair. Just to be honest, I plaited, and I was like, so that's how I was kind of proud of my plaits, like, But once I was vulnerable, man, it just takes a whole different. And I guarantee you, if I ask her about that right now, she's 20 years old. She probably remembers that. Probably when she was 7, the day that my daddy braided my baby doll's hair.
Are there any pictures floating around?
No, ain't no pictures. No, don't get. I actually wish I would have had pictures.
But here's my question. Here's my question, because I think I talked with Walter about this earlier this week. This whole idea of toxicity, See, this idea toxic, and I asked the question: is does one have to grant themselves? And I may have phrased it a little different, but does one have to grant themselves permission or be? I think that's how I said it. One have to grant permission to be in toxicity. Because to be toxic, it just doesn't just happen. There has to be the way I understand it, the way I see it, in that when you start talking about toxic masculinity, right there, is there some type of there is a relationship that is connected with that for it to allowance. That was the word I used. It was allowance. Is there some type of allowance that happens in that toxicity for it to kind of rear its head? Because I'm not the word toxic. Maybe it's because we've used it so much. And Walter responded with, "Go ahead, Walter," because you gave me.
But my response was that it's not an allowance. That in some instances, again, in the instance that Martin uses, his daughter didn't have a choice who her father is. He chose to be toxic in that situation. Where's she going?
Right.
Was she able to? Yeah, and the same is true for African Americans in this country. The same is true for women, as far as sexism is concerned. Where are they going? Ceiling is a glass ceiling for a reason, because
I would
not that they'll happen. What can you do? How can we get rid of
it? And this toxic, I think we're born into it. Until we're taught otherwise by someone or a group who are allowed themselves to be vulnerable or allow themselves to be participants to teach otherwise, we come into it. I mean, it's just like what Martin said. Yeah. It's that masculine mindset. He didn't learn it. He was born into it. Men don't play with baby dolls.
Yeah.
Girls don't play with trains. Like, you're born into that mindset, and it just continues to morph itself. And then when we become adults, it's like second nature, and we don't even think or our minds don't even process what we're doing when we're doing it. And we have to desensitize ourselves to be more attentive to what's going on around us.
Yeah. Say that again. Oh, preach it, preacher.
Whatever, boy.
Meanwhile,
that was a good. But what I'm saying, that
point
point was deep, because you said desensitize.
Right.
That was a good word.
And that's something I had to do with myself. I mean, we talked about scripture, and I'm very intentional now when I'm reading. Anytime I see the word "he," I'm either saying God or the name of whoever it's referring to.
And I'm glad you said that point right there, because that kind of pushes me to ask this next point is when Audre Lorde, and that's that creativeness that you're talking about, that in being inventive and being intentional about saying, I'm not going to do this. You remember when Audre Lorde talks about they were at the choir, the singing event with the students from Tougaloo, and they learned that Martin Luther King had died, and the students continued to sing. And she says, we were on the brink of chaos, but the edge of chaos, the sense of living on the edge of chaos. But she says that whatever I was doing, whatever we were doing that was creative and right, functioned to hold us from going over that edge. And so this masculinity you're talking about, when you choose to say God instead of Father, that is creative and right and intentional, not to push people over this edge. And in some places now, we understand you say that and you will be pushed over the edge, because that is, let's be clear, that is going to get you in trouble. Because look, folks notice.
I will say that yes, folks noticed, but that didn't so much, I don't think, got me in trouble, but it started a conversation.
You're right.
To
That's
wonder
good.
why.
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, this is how the conversation started. What version are you reading?
Well, but here's the other question, Nick. But you did it while you was reading a scripture,
right?
But I guarantee you, if you would have did it doing the Lord's Prayer.
But that's anything. Like even when I'm reading, like if I'm reading a passage out of my Sunday school book or a book that I'm reading or using as a reference, I do it. It's not just with scripture. It's become. I'm very.
Well, I see how he's trying to set you up, Nick. So I'm gonna rescue you.
I'm not trying to set you up. I'm just saying
No, but you made a valid. No, I'm saying your point is valid.
Right.
But again, the person that finds it oppressive, that's fine when we can control it, when we can do it. But what happens when somebody else does it in your presence?
Right.
Do you do you just, are you silent? You see what I'm saying? When it's beyond, when you're complicit in it. And so that's what we demand of people on race. Like when you're around people and they say the N-word, you need to do something right then. So it's okay for them to say, well, I don't say it.
Well, hold up. Who are we talking about here now?
No, I'm what do you mean specifically? What I'm just saying, like,
because let's just be clear. If you know good and I almost said something. I know y'all church for one, so I try to mind my manners, but I know good and god darn well if somebody say nigga around y'all, that ain't gonna go
the way
well. Because
But no. I'm saying I'm using it as a comparison. I'm saying that if somebody said the N-word.
Oh, you're not talking about us.
No. I'm talking about. I'm saying I said what we're demanding from our white sisters and brothers is if they hear it, right? Because we make the distinction between racist and anti-racist, right?
Right.
So we say, okay, it's fine. I'm not going to say it. Man, you went some way.
But Mark, you make a great point.
But I'm saying, so when somebody else says his, and it's in your presence, when you can't control, when you're complicit and you don't say anything, all of a sudden, so were you saying that just to satisfy your guilt? But or are you really committed to being anti-sexist?
My question to that's a great point.
I see why y'all said this to begin with.
Who in that
right? You see what I'm saying?
Who in those situations are prepared to be martyrs though? Because that can get you to a place to where you can become a martyr very quickly.
So
well, maybe not a martyr as much as ostracized.
But I'm saying martyr in a sense of you can find yourself unemployed.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like we use this language, but it's like who's really prepared to get to that point?
Yeah.
But here's now. Do you fault a person for saying I'm going to do what I have to do to secure my job?
I don't. Honestly, I don't.
I mean, because I'm not in their shoes.
I don't either. I don't.
I mean, like I'm not. I got some of my brothers and sisters clergy.
Look, and y'all have heard me say it often, and I'll continue to say it. Look, there's different ways we all fight in the struggle.
Right.
Everybody don't need to be unemployed. Everybody don't need to be unemployed. Yeah.
Some people gotta say, you know what?
But if your fight is not that, don't make the claim.
Right. There you go. And
that's all I say.
And for me, if you just confess, like, hey, man, I just can't. And I've had some students that say, hey, I just can't preach that in my church. I get it. Okay. Hey, grace abounds, right? I know what our heart is. And so That's what I try to stay with.
Yeah, that's this is Scott put this. He put another one up too, but we got a little further past. He said, "Not using God in the masculine is an act of love and inclusion that might leave some people back. Using a racial slur is complicit with murder and genocide. Big difference." Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't. I was using it for an example. I wasn't comparing. It wasn't for the comparative aspect of making it, balanced. I get that. The change the N word and that. Yeah,
well,
wasn't.
But I wanna let's stick with this whole thing here, because if you're gonna change, it's one thing to deal with language, but actions also become very important too. And I think that goes back to Walter's quote about, seeing and doing, hearing. Make the quote again, Walter, from Henry Mason or Henry
Bergam.
I can only see what I can comprehend.
Yeah. So if you ain't gelling with that, it doesn't even matter about the language if you ain't really willing to back that thing up with your actions. So if you really believe that, you'll be willing to necessarily say, hey, because I believe this, me saying, hey, I may lose my job won't be that big a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I say that
here's the thing.
Flippantly,
if you got,
go ahead.
I'm gonna say, if you've got a staff full of male leaders who are constantly reading the scripture, even if they change the language, you're still sending a message.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, who's still in control, as you say? It's not just changing the language. It's changing what we understand about power and about all of that. What do we do? Actually do it.
That was the big
in real.
You know what, Walt? It goes back to the brother the United Methodist pastor who did the prayer in the house, and he said, "What?
Amen." And a woman.
A woman, yeah. Oh, a woman. Now, and we've had our discussions about that from a theological standpoint, and I necessarily it didn't bother me at all. But what the end result was, if he was serious about equality, he would have just said, "Look, let's just get a woman in here to pray."
Yeah.
Because see, if he was serious about it, he wouldn't have just said a woman. He would have said, "Let's get a woman in here to do the prayer, and I'll stand in the back." Because see, performance is a big thing. You want to just perform so you can be seen, so you can make the appearance as if I'm down with equality.
Yeah,
is one thing, but when you really have to be, operate in equity, now something totally different. As in, I can say all these other things as God and all this stuff, but when it comes time to say, hey, let's put women in these positions, are you there? As I've read many women say, all these black pastors are saying, big ups to Vice President Kamala Harris, but yet they don't have any women on their staff in their churches.
Right. Well,
right.
Two things. This kind of brought up that big issue with the social justice thing in mainstream sports. Like, you putting all this on the court, you doing all this, but where are the changes in the power structure?
Mm-hmm.
That's where we can say, because if you don't put nothing on the court, on the back of the jersey, or no commercial, or nothing, when you change the power structure, everything changes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I always say about the difference between a transaction and transformation. Transactions can lead to transformation, but what he did was misuse his male privilege, and it was just to say that, and that was a transaction. And I thought and I don't know his intent, so I don't know his heart. But I'm saying what actually happened though was, that didn't happen. People were talking about him more so than transforming the reason why he said that. You see what I'm saying? So now his privilege, male privilege, put him front and center, and the real issue was put was tabled per se because of what he did.
Well,
he didn't think that I if he thought that through, I'm like, wow. Or was it impulsive? I don't know.
My second or just a vulnerable moment even coincides with that. I've never forgot about it. And this is a vulnerable moment. I never forgot about it when we did the like until this day, I still think about that. About the
I do too.
We did what now?
Mass mistake that I made.
Yeah.
In
the 7 last words.
It wasn't a impulsive idea to do purposefully, but when it was brought to my attention, it's like, dang, like it's always that moment of I wish I could go back and change it.
Yeah.
Like so I think that's another part of my intentionality, that it's always in front of my face, even to this day. And that's been what, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Like, so it makes me more intentional, really. Like you say, Walter, the eyes can only see what the mind can comprehend. And it's always there. Like, all right, you do something, make sure, because you don't want to do that again. Like, and so that mindset of getting knocked off of your rocks to be intentional about what you're doing, what you're saying, and what those around you are doing and saying also.
Right.
Yeah, because that's back to the forced evolution. That's what's wrong. That's why we have so many issues in America, because most of this evolution was forced. And if you can't legislate things of the heart. Like, you can't make somebody in terms of, you want to have equal rights. You can't. There's no law that's going to change, going to make you do right. I mean, that's some of the issues that we have.
What say you, Walter? I saw
there's no law that can make you do right.
But
no, I agree. There is no law that can make you do right. But if the law gives you permission to do it, guess what? You go it. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we need the laws too. Again, we can't separate the thinking from the feeling. I'm gonna think about the law. I may still go ahead and do it because the way I feel, but we need the law.
At least there's some repercussions if you do it.
And I hear what you're saying about the force. Right, I hear the forced evolution, what you're saying, but in the history of the world, and I had this discussion, Brian may remember, in front of the chapel with a gentleman during our seminary days about this very thing I'm about to say. But in the history, I ain't gonna say it. Shut your mouth. In the history of the world, there has not been one instance where a people has peacefully given up power. Not in the history of the world.
Right.
If someone is in power, to get that power from them, they didn't just say, "Okay, you're right. Here you go." That not in the history of the world. You can look high and low. You can come up with any example you want, and I will tear it apart. Because there is no way, there's no time when that has ever happened in the history of the world. I will stand on that till the day I die.
But I'll ask you this question, and this is kind of comical, but do you blame them?
No. You have heard me.
If the shoe was on the other foot.
How many times have I sat here and said, if I was a white person,
right,
I would probably be the biggest racist y'all would ever meet. I'm just gonna be honest. I call all y'all a bunch of dumbass niggas, and shouldn't even shock y'all. I'm just being honest because it would work for my benefit, and I would be a Christian. See,
because it all works.
But here's the thing.
I mean, let's just be honest, because it works.
But here's the other thing.
Go ahead.
Audre Lorde addresses this very thing, not only from the point of the person in power, but from her point as the person who is not in power. She was talking toward the end there about she held back from asking some questions in a certain piece that she wrote, because she could bear of being rejected or being told, nah, this is the way it is. We men, we empower. She said, I didn't ask why is women loving women so threatening to black men unless they want to assume the white male position. She said, I didn't ask that question because of me, because I couldn't bear it. And realizing I couldn't bear it, it makes it making more sense for you not to be able to recognize it or not be able to willingly face it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
so I wonder how much of it is as to go back to the race issue, how much is it as black people not willing to ask the question like just directly and being vulnerable enough to hear the answer that comes back.
But you remember when she's in the classroom and she says, I'm married to a white dude. And she says, now that's not a question that they asked. That's something that I shared because I thought they needed to know.
No, right.
So what does that really mean, that she felt it was necessary to share with them that at the time she was married to a white man and she had 2 biracial children with them, because she's at this historical black college and university teaching poetry about and what does it mean to be black in America in this black space? Because let's be clear, we're talking about, I think it was late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s when she's doing this. I don't know if this is going to go off real well, with this, because how you teaching us blackness, but yet, quote unquote, you compromise your blackness and went with this married this white man. But it didn't happen like that because they loved her because she was vulnerable.
That reminds me of what was that? Freedom Riders.
Say more.
When you got this European woman in a class full of minority students that nobody wants nothing to do with, and she's trying to prepare them for something greater than themselves, and it doesn't go well initially because it's this privileged woman who's never struggled, who's never had to deal with what we deal with on a daily basis. But when she becomes vulnerable to them, their minds open to what they can see and comprehend of what where she's trying to get them. And the whole dynamic of that relationship changes.
So does one always have to be, Scott put this up here earlier and I didn't show it, but he said this. He says, but with black women, I acknowledge the danger of being vulnerable around whites. So is it always, now if y'all don't know, Scott's a white dude now.
And we saw the picture.
Yeah. It might have been a meme. It might have been a meme.
It could have been a Bernie meme, but no. Yeah, I've seen Scott post on your post before, so I know.
So what does it mean? Should I always be vulnerable at all times? Because being vulnerable could get you in some trouble.
It could get you killed. No.
Get you killed. Yeah,
you shouldn't be vulnerable. No. And so some of our one of our greatest defenses is the time when we meme mug and stuff like that. That's one of our, no matter what our intent is, right? When you meme mug, it's a sense of security in that that we have to do, that we can't always walk around how we feel all the time, because it will, it will get you literally killed.
We definitely can't walk around how we really feel. Like,
no,
man, it would literally be civil war if we really walked around how we really felt.
And because eventually somebody would say, like, it will be some kind of remark you know, that this is who you are, that you know, you always are using a race card, or you always are doing this, and it just wouldn't be healthy. I mean, people have to see a level of defense that you just can't afford to do that.
No,
I mean,
no
way.
No.
And I definitely won't want to be around.
It has to be a
Brian
guessing game.
Really showing his
Well,
real feelings.
It has
I
to
go
be,
back to her use of her.
game.
Well,
Oh, you, Walter.
well, I don't want to agree, but I don't think it being a guessing game is going to work well if it's constantly a guessing game.
Say more.
Say more.
Yeah, I was going to say it. Yeah.
Say more. Say more about that, Walter.
Well, I
Don't
was
try to
going
act
to
like
go
you
back to
froze
her
either.
example of grammar or trivia or any of those things. Once you understand, huh?
I said,
Am
don't
I frozen?
try to act like you. I don't try to act like you frozen.
Oh,
It must have frozen for real. But my point was, like I said, the way she uses grammar, like once you understand it, then you can use it or you can discard it. Like at some points, I'm going to be vulnerable, but at other points, I know how to, so that it's not dangerous for me. I'm using it for my benefit. A biography of the latest biography of Frederick Douglass, and he is vulnerable. He shows the scars on his in those presentations to uses the scars for his benefit. Now, in other places, in other settings, when he's talking, he doesn't show the scars because it wouldn't have been to his benefit. It would have helped him get his point across. I think it's the use of vulnerability or not is contextual. And I know that word has gotten to be overused, but it is contextual in many ways. It's how we use the vulnerability. Once we understand how to use it, I think is what's important.
Well, let me ask this, and I'm going to ask us to do something that is we have to really think about it. But everybody on here is married except Nick. What does that mean? What does it mean to be? What would we think about vulnerability as it relates to our spouses and our daughters going out into this white racist world? Do we want that at all times?
no,
not the guessing game, but what how do we teach them? I tell but we don't want to. Do we teach them to be strong, hardcore, hard body, or do we teach them to be vulnerable? I mean, how do we navigate that, or do we say leave that to your mother and let her teach you how to be black girl magic, and I'm just there to knock folk teeth out when they misuse you?
Well, I don't want to be the first to jump in because I don't have kids nor am I.
Well, you did,
but I think that, like, when you said that, it took me right back to last week.
Right.
Like, we can't immediately, as black males, draw back because we got daughters. We still have to do some kind of impartation into that mindset of what they ought or what we would like them to become by being really who we are. But just like Audre Lorde said last week,
with her son, right? You're
really
right.
Want to make you who I want you to be.
Yeah,
you become who you ought to be by me really being who I am and learning and becoming who I should be. And so I don't think it's so much of what do we do. It's internal thing. How do I really better myself to be the best example for my daughters to be who they need to be in the white racist world that I know from living that they're going to step into at some point in time?
That boy good.
Yeah, because and, you know, they're still gonna, you know, they're gonna be what they see is what. So I mean, it's what, you know, one of the things about teaching, we shouldn't think that the pedagogy and parenting is all about what I lecture, where I think that it's more what they see. Because I remember my daughter, she was a Black Lives Matter in Greensboro when that things were hot. First thing I did was call her and tell her, hey, I don't want to catch you out there. She was like, Dad, did you really say that? I said, yeah. She said, well, I learned this from you.
But you be
and my grandpa,
right,
who marched with Dr. King. So what would you expect for me not to do? I said, let's pray. Go ahead and do what you got to do. When you get home, call me. I mean, that's all. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how could I expect less of her? And it's almost like, was that just her being my baby girl? Or was that saying women, really, you're not effective fighting? Which was it? You know what I'm saying? Which
well,
one?
let's be honest.
Well, understand. But I expect the same. I do the same thing with my son, and he's 6'1", 310 pounds. So,
well, let's be honest. Let's look at ourselves. How much do carry over in our lives to this day from what our parents told us versus what our parents did around us?
Oh, it's always what you saw. I know with me.
Right. So,
I said with me.
It's not so much of what we're quote unquote teaching or lecturing or however we want to put it. The majority of our lives and who we become is based off of what we see, what we experience. I think I was watching an interview. Actually, no, it wasn't an interview. It was for some reason I was watching Shannon Sharp's Hall of Fame speech today. And he was like, I can tell you everything my grandfather and grandmother did when I was growing up. It hung on who I became. Like, so it's this repetitious of what I guess it goes. We keep going back to Henry.
That guy,
the French guy.
The eyes can only see what the mind
right.
can comprehend.
That's a good quote, Walter. That's like, good.
I mean,
well, look, we don't hit about an hour, so we're gonna cut this out. Next week is one of her most profound chapters, the uses of anger, women responding to racism. This is a chapter.
That's my next chapter, buddy.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I went too far.
Wait a minute. Do I got the wrong book? My next chapter.
The Master's Tool. This is probably her most profound one here. The Master's Tool never dismantles the Master's house. Yeah. This is probably the most quoted one. So we'll see y'all. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, freedom is yours if you're willing to fight for it. Peace. Hey, and remember to like and share.